Hello and welcome to this episode of Mindset Mentoring for athletes, families, and entrepreneurs. I'm your host, Coach Chuck. There are seasons in life when success feels effortless and seasons when pressure exposes everything. What separates those who collapse under pressure from those who convert adversity into expansion is not really luck, not really resources. It truly is about mindset. Today's conversation is about resilience under pressure, not in theory, not in motivational slogans, but real business losses, real stress, real family impact. So stay tuned for that conversation. Parents today are carrying a weight that most generations never even had to name. Anxiety is rising, depression is rising, and teen suicide is now one of the leading causes of death amongst young people. And here's what really gets said out loud. Parents, you struggle too. You're trying to lead your family in a world that's changed faster than anyone prepares you for, and you love your kids deeply, yet sometimes wonder if what worked for you is enough for them. I'm Coach Chuck Barnhart, and I spent nearly 40 years as an educator and mindset mentor, and I've watched this shift up close. I've also lived it as a father of 4 children. My son Billy and I are launching a family mentorship because transformation doesn't happen in isolation. Teens don't need fixing. Families need leadership, language, and tools that bring them back together. This mentorship is designed for parents and teens walking the journey together, guided by experience, faith, and practical mindset training. And if you're part of the senior generation, a grandparent, a mentor, coach, or trusted voice, I want to ask something of you. Please consider sharing this with the families you know. Sometimes the invitation carries more weight when it comes from someone they trust. And somewhere out there is a family that needs to hear the message. This isn't for everyone, but for the right families, it changes everything. You can learn more by going to thechampionsmindsetmentorship.com. Welcome back. My guest is Nathan Baws, a serial entrepreneur, business growth strategist, author, keynote speaker, and international best-selling co-author of Cracking the Rich Code alongside Tony Robbins and Brian Tracy. Nathan has launched and scaled more than 19 ventures across multiple industries, many reaching 7-figure turnover, while navigating his fair share of public setbacks and hard lessons along the way. What makes Nathan's perspective powerful is not simply his wins, but his rebuilding seasons. When expanding a successful restaurant into multiple locations led to daily financial losses and overwhelming stress, he could have shut down. Instead, he leaned into creativity, guerrilla marketing, strategic partnerships, and disciplined problem solving. That season refined the resilience and adaptability he now teaches worldwide. Nathan blends business strategy with mindset optimization, health discipline, and what he calls the dopamine strategy, empowering individuals and organizations to perform at a high level without sacrificing well-being. This episode, we explore staying creative when resources are tight, protecting your energy during crisis, the ripple effect stress has on family, and why resilience is not a personality trait, but a trained mindset habit. Now, Nathan, welcome to the show.
Hi, Chuck. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. I always like to begin by at least giving my guests have an opportunity to kind of give us a little bit of background on, where you were brought up, kind of a little bit of your upbringing, just to kind of set that frame, and then we can get into the topic at hand.
Yeah, sure. I started my journey in Australia. I'm living in Australia and being brought up in a background of very, very limited resources. So family, a single mum, single parent, and not too many dollars in the bank. So at a very young age, it encouraged me to start my entrepreneurial journey. We were eating a lot of potatoes, and I realized at a very young age that I didn't want to be eating a lot of potatoes. So it, natural entrepreneurship was the only option I had back then, at a very young age of about 6 when I first started my entrepreneurial journey, and haven't sort of looked back. Have had a lot of different experiences since then, and grown a lot. So it's been a fun journey.
It's interesting because you talk about that early stage of that entrepreneurial journey, and for some people that I've met who've come from some trying backgrounds, financially background, that seems to be in some cases the way out. It's not about always getting, I shouldn't say like they don't want to get an education, but they gravitate towards that building a business. Some gravitate towards that, the I'm going to go to college, get a good job, and others just kind of, you know, settle in.
Mm,
Now, you said it
mm.
was a natural inclination towards entrepreneurship. Was there was there any model in your life for that, or was it? Do you really
No,
believe it was kind of like natural, just something
it
ingrained?
was the only option. At 6 years old, I realized I didn't want to be eating potatoes every day. I wanted potentially even a steak on my plate. And so at 6 years old, there wasn't much option to go to college and to learn how to get a job. It was a bare necessity of how do we move forwards. Didn't really want to be in that lifestyle that we had, and I realized that pretty early on. And I think since then, it's just given me the motivation. And my sister and I have these conversations quite regularly about the fact that we are pretty motivated, and we never want to go back to that what we were brought up with. And she is incredibly driven, and I guess I am as well. And that's just the motivation that took took us where we've been in our life, and the businesses I've been involved in, and the motivation to keep going every day. So it's been a very good foundation actually for learning a lot of particularly creative strategies. We've had very limited resources, and as they say, with limited resources, you have to become more resourceful yourself, and learn more, and find out ways of marketing, or ways of getting sales, or growing a business without big bank accounts. So it's been a very much a driving force behind the direction that we've taken, and what we've learnt, and how we've conducted ourselves.
In the introduction, I read that it's about mindset. It wasn't about resources, not about what was the other word. But sometimes I think people can try to push back a little bit on that. And my argument, and I want to kind of hear what your view is on this, but it really isn't the resources, because if your mindset isn't right, you don't really have access to those resources. You don't, if your mindset's not right, you don't begin to think creative or problem solve.
Mm,
It's you that fixed mindset is, oh man, I hit this brick wall. What do I do now? Or make the excuses. I don't have the money, so I can't do that advertising campaign, or I can't do this. Well, with the right mindset, you begin to go, all right, I don't have the money. What else can I do? Or how else can I get the money? Or you begin to think differently. What's your take on that?
100%, yeah. It is pretty challenging too when you are in that very stressful situation, as you mentioned, where things are tight and things are going bad. I find that the most challenging time to think creatively. And creative thinking is, for me, one of the most fundamental things to move from a challenging situation to a more fruitful outcome. So it is a challenge, and I think what I've developed, my background's in health, so I studied health and nutrition, and became a naturopath. And I think the foundation there was really, really useful to help move forwards into to deal with stressful situations and to allow the brain to become creative. I mean, when you're in those challenging times, it's a combination of creativity and just head down, bum up, just, slogging it out. You have to keep going. And I think the background with the motivation of never being in that poor financial situation as I was as a child, that combined with creative motivation and creative thinking of how do we get out of there, asking those really important questions of, we don't have the resources, so how can we make it happen? That they say the quality of your life is dictated by the quality of the questions that you ask. And just as in AI, the quality of the output is determined by the quality of the input that you put in as the prompt. And finding the right solutions is, I think it always really starts with, how the heck can I do this? How can I? These are all my limitations. I've got resource, you've got limited money, I've got limited skill set, I've got whatever the situation is. With those given situations, how can we move forwards? And I think if you phrase it in the right way, you will always find a solution. And the good thing is, we're not always the first ones. We're not the pioneers of any of these problems. There's people that have come before us, like yourself, as a coach. There's people that have done it or know that there's solutions out there. So it's just really a question of tapping into other people's skill sets and knowledge, and going onto the internet, and AI now is fantastic to help you solve those problems.
You just said several things right in there that I want to kind of delve into a little bit. You know, I, the question piece is all the years I've worked with teenagers, and the teenagers I've worked with struggled lots of ways, but it was ultimately their mindset was behind a lot of it. But they also had very limited ability to ask good questions. So one of the things I discovered early on, actually, is very helpful from a parent of one of the students I had, who had mentioned an organization called the Right Question Institute. And um,
Love it.
yeah, it was like, oh, so I looked up that resource and it was like, oh, it just helped formulate a structure to what I already knew I needed to do and all that. But asking those questions and going through the process of asking them, I've been amazed that by the time students got even to the seventh and eighth grade when I had them, they they didn't know how to ask questions. Like
Mm.
it was flabbergasting to me. I think it was Tony Robbins who you co-authored that book with him. But part of my training, I'm pretty sure it was him. I remember saying that asking questions is nothing more than the basis of thinking, because when you think, you're really asking questions and trying to answer the question. So
Mm.
now you have said that. So you started early in entrepreneurial journey. Did this whole process of trying to ask questions, was that something you found yourself doing even at a young age, or was there a mentor somewhere along the line that kind of helped you begin to ask better questions?
In the early days, definitely, unfortunately, there was no such thing as a mentor. I wish there was. And funny enough, one of the businesses that I run now helps kids to exactly do that, to financial literacy and real world education in entrepreneurship. So I do that with a lot of schools in Perth, where I live. So that would have been hugely useful for me back then as a kid, and I wish I had access to it, but had no idea that this sort of stuff even existed. So, although at a young age I was using questions, I wasn't aware of the questions and how powerful questions can become in shaping where you spend your time, what your solutions are to the problems that you have. So, at a young age, so at 6 is when I first started my first business. And I was asking myself, well, what can I do? How can I make money? I had no idea how to make money. I thought making money was actually physically creating a coin or physically creating a note. I mean, that's how little you know about making money, and no training. And obviously we're in that financial situation because we had no idea about money. We had no idea how to make money. Mum didn't know, dad wasn't around much. So no one was there to mentor. And as I developed and as I went into business, I realized that I needed that assistance because I wanted to fast track. And one of my most successful businesses was when I was under the wing of, in the health industry, of a pharmacist who was a phenomenal business person, absolutely amazing. And for 8 years, I was paid just as a job, and it was the first job I had really. But I was paid really well, and I got to learn all this stuff, which was more valuable than the money that I was paid. And after that, I went out on my own in the same industry, in the health industry, opened up health shops and created a vitamin supplement brand that I sold across Australia. And that was really, I had a great exit out of that. And that was all around the fact that I had this amazing mentor that I just absorbed. I just sucked all the information and found excuses to be around him as much as I could to learn everything. Ended up being mates with his son, and happily went on holidays and all sorts of things with him just to be around, just get more of that understanding of what makes a person successful. So I was really lucky in that respect that I had a lot of absorption of all that information, and then also had another two coaches throughout my life that I paid to coach me, who were phenomenal at what they did. Sales, marketing, body language, and some really big names who I paid a lot of money for, but gladly and happily to do it to understand, to fast track understanding of business. So yeah, you can do it on your own and be pretty unsuccessful. And I've done that in different industries and struggled. And then in the industries that I've actually had help with, yeah, you can fast track it a lot better.
Yeah, this is my second entrepreneurial go round. The first one was out of college, right after getting certified in NLP by Tony Robbins. I came back to Maine and thought I'd be able to do what Tony did. He wasn't much older than me. Just put ads in paper. People will show up to seminars, and I'll teach them, and things will be great. Yes, well,
Easy, easy,
yeah,
that easy.
not
Yeah.
quite that easy, right? And anyways, the one thing led to another. I found my way into education, which is, in hindsight, is really where I needed to be for that time in my life. Now that I've gone back into the entrepreneurial realm, I realize that I need coaches. I need some mentors. I like that is a good investment of my dollars, right? Is
Mm,
to find that expertise and not just find it and read about it and buy a textbook. You can go that route, but a real person who has those nuances of experience besides just whatever technical stuff they might have
right.
is that experience that matters so much. Now, I want to, because you mentioned the health background and all that, and also I know you were in the restaurant industry, and it sounded like from the information and all that the restaurant industry was where you had one of your major trials and stressors and all. And I know
Learning curves, shall we
learning,
say? Yes.
yeah, well, and restaurant
Yeah.
business is a tough industry. My brother-in-law was
Yeah.
in it for a number of years, and low margins and just hard hours and all that.
Mm.
Um, can you kind of talk us through how you got into that first of all, and then what it was that the challenges were and the impact of those, and kind of walk us through that little stage of your journey, your life, lessons learned.
Sure, sure. Yeah, well, I had just I'd done a few things beforehand that went quite well. The health industry that I mentioned. After I did that, I went over to the UK, and it was just around the time of the financial crisis in 2009-10, global financial crisis, where banks stopped lending money, and I'd just gone to the UK to play with some property. I'd been investing in the UK in the housing market for a few years before that, and that was going really well. The returns were really strong, so I thought let's sell up. So I sold up the health industry in that, and then went across to the housing property market to play in that with my sister, who was also there. And yeah, that was around the time the bank stopped lending. So that concept that we were going to do of buy, refurbish, increase the equity, and then pull it out and then put it into the next property just totally disappeared. So we had to find a creative solution to continue to do what we wanted to do of building property portfolios. So we utilised the system, brought it across from Australia. That was another mentor actually that I had, and learnt a lot, and then did a whole bunch of properties in this manner in the UK. And then off the back of that, we had a child, and I thought that London was no place to bring up a little person. So we decided to come back to Australia. And I was thinking, well, what do I do now? What business can I run? My father-in-law was in the food manufacturing business. He was making pasta and had some amazing products. And I thought, well, this is obviously a great asset. We should be utilizing this. And so I built a brand around some of his products, and called Tommy Sugo, which is, I went on to Shark Tank with and pitched concept of restaurants at that stage. And so I opened up the first restaurant. That went really well, and I thought, this is fantastic. I'm bulletproof. I've just been off the back end of some good exits, and hey, I've done that. I can do anything, right? So it's that easy. And so I opened the second, and then opened the third restaurant, and then all of a sudden realized that actually, no, it wasn't quite doing as well as we thought. And although we'd opened one successfully, then I opened a second one. When I opened the second restaurant, it was like, this is great business. I can open it everywhere, anywhere it can be successful. Where is the busiest possible location in Western Australia that I could open up? So I went to the busiest possible shopping centre. Unfortunately, the rents were kind of on the high side as well. And I opened up there, and then very early had the experience of understanding that perhaps that wasn't the best place to open up, and perhaps it wasn't the right clientele that were after what I was selling. In fact, one of the most common questions that I had when people came up to the restaurant and placed an order was, as they were looking up at the menu board, is what is spaghetti? And it was at that stage that I started to get a little bit worried and realized that probably should have tested the market first, done a little bit of research, and realized very quickly that wrong clientele, wrong product offering for the location. And it wasn't soon after that I found myself losing a lot of money on a very regular basis when I had a couple of restaurants, and spreading myself too thin, realizing that I didn't have enough middle management and didn't have enough structured team members in place that could help scale the business, and there wasn't enough cash flow coming in to be able to put those people in place. So it was a little bit of a challenging time, shall we say, and a big learning curve there. Learnt a lot of lessons there. And one of them was just with the ego, realizing that you don't have to be stuck in a situation that doesn't work for you. You can just get out of it. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs have that issue of like, well, if I get out of it, that means I'm a failure. And doesn't that mean that I'm unsuccessful? So getting your head around that was one of the best things that I could have done. And it took me a freaking long time to get my head around that and to actually get to that stage where I said, actually, let's draw a line in the sand. This business has not been successful. I have not had the right skill set to pull this off, to make this work. Could I get the right skill set? Well, maybe, yeah. I could really dedicate myself. There's a lot of moving parts, especially when you've got three restaurants and 35 staff and you're losing money. Yes, you can probably dig yourself out, but is that the best use of your time? And I got to the stage where I said, no, hang on a second. If I cut my losses here, let me pull out of that. Let me utilize the lessons that I've learned from that incredibly challenging and incredibly high learning time and apply that to the next business. And this isn't, I'm not just judging myself. I don't care what other people think about me, but I don't want to judge myself based on one outcome, one business. I've got a lot of businesses that I want to do and that I have been running and some have been very successful. So who cares? And funny enough, you put this mindset on yourself of like, oh, what's everyone going to say? And I remember shutting one of them down, the busiest shopping centre in Perth, shutting it down, exiting it out of that, breaking the lease, negotiating my way out of a broken lease because I thought 7-year lease would be good to secure myself and the rent rises, but realised on the back end of that, not so good when we hadn't tested the market. And then at the end of that, I shut everything down. And I thought, oh God, what are people going to think? And one person ever said anything. They came up to me and said, "Oh, where'd your shop go? Where'd your restaurant go?" I said, "Oh, we shut down. We weren't doing so well." And they said, "Oh, okay, cool," and moved on. And that was it. And it's just hilarious the crap that we put on ourselves as to what great aunt Betty is going to say, or how do I appear? And it's like, who gives a SH1T, who cares? Like, that's where you develop your thick skin, and if it doesn't benefit you, get out of it. Just leave. That's my scenario on it.
Yeah, a couple
Yeah.
questions for you. First, more of a comment, I guess, is that the idea that you just kind of alluded to there about the stories we tell ourselves, right? So you begin to imagine, oh, geez, what are people going to say? What are going to people think? And students I had, particularly middle school students, do that all the time, and they
Mm,
project, right? They project so much on what other people might think or say. Most of the time, they're wrong, and it's totally imagined, but they create all that stress and angst within themselves, right?
mm.
And then that prevents them from taking action and moving on. One of the questions I do have is, do you think if this experience had happened early, like because you said you were pretty successful with the nutrition supplement stuff, would things have been different? Do you think if this had happened before you'd had some success, or or were you at by that age that you were, starting a supplement business stuff, so locked in enough with the whole entrepreneurial spirit and all that you would have just handled it the same way?
That's a great question. I haven't really been asked that before. It's interesting because if it was earlier on, I think, and I hope the mindset that I had with just being motivated, because I'd come from that at an early age where there weren't too many resources around. I have a feeling that I would continue to push through. Um, in my mind, there was never any option of defeat. Just just work harder or work smarter or just keep going or whatever it was in the mind that kept me going. But yeah, it's a good question. Would it have changed things much? I don't think I would have had as many lessons behind me that I'd learned from the other businesses. So potentially the scale of the disaster could have been even bigger back then if I hadn't had the skills that I developed, be it minimal for that industry, but the skills that I developed previously. So yeah, good question.
One of the things talk a lot about with some of the coaching I do is trying to get people in a success loop because it feeds on itself. And Um, when again, oftentimes it's teenagers I'm working with, but adults too, when they have struggled in the past, they don't see the possibility as clearly. So they're more susceptible to any sort of setback going, oh, see, there it goes again, just kind of proving that little story they've already got going. But I had a hunch that you had kind of gone beyond that from like just the way your childhood went and all that, you'd already kind of developed some of those beliefs around like I I am just gonna keep going. Like I'm just gonna keep plowing ahead.
Mhm.
And the earlier we can do that, I think it's just so much more empowering for people.
Yeah, I think with that, Chuck, I realized that the past doesn't equal your future, and we do actually have control over what input goes into our brain. And it was at that stage I was actually going through some coaching with a mentor, really great guy, and he actually pulled me aside one day and told me a really interesting story about understanding the way that we interpret success or failure, and it had a huge impact on the way I reshaped any problem or any challenging time. And I know a lot of people go through challenging times, and way more than what I had. But it was a great little story where he was saying one of his students was attacked at a ATM, automatic, like a cash machine, and she got actually hit over the back of the head with an axe, the back of an axe, and she got dragged, and all her money stolen. It was pretty horrific, and got reported in the news. And he learned very quickly that this had taken place, and so he got on the phone to her a little while afterwards and said, so yeah, challenging times. What did you learn from that? And she was quite in that. Still, this is a couple of days after, but still in that hysteria sort of phase where she was very, very anxious. And she said, "Well," she snapped very quickly and said, "Oh, what are you talking about? I didn't learn anything. Someone attacked me. It had nothing to do with me. It was beyond beyond my control." And he kept drilling down and say, well, look, surely there's a lesson. Even if there was a very small lesson, there must have been a lesson in that. And, defenses were, no, 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 no lesson, no lesson. This happened to me. I had nothing to do with it. And he continued to peel the onion, take the layers off. And eventually she said, well, look, actually, if there's anything I learned, maybe I need to be a little bit more aware. And he said, oh, okay. So how does that affect you in your life now? And she said, well, I suppose if I had a bit more awareness, I'd be probably a little bit more interactive with my children. I'd be a little bit more aware of their needs. And sometimes I'm not as aware as I should be. And he said, well, okay, so how would that benefit you? And she said, well, of course, I would have a much better relationship with my children. And then he did the same process again and said, well, what did you learn? There must be another lesson. And then she kept digging deeper and found more lessons, and then applied it to how can that benefit you? How can that benefit you going forwards? And then he asked the question, if I had a magic wand and I could take away that whole event and just completely remove it from your life, would you like me to do that? And without a moment's hesitation, she said, absolutely not. I needed that in my life for where I am right now. So it was a really interesting eye opener, and I learned a lot from that lesson and started applying it immediately, and realizing through any challenging situation, there's always a lesson that you learn that can help you and can benefit you going forwards. And that my takeaway out of that was that we actually have control over how we interpret challenges. We can either stack it for success, or we can use it just to roll into the same mindset that everyone else has out there of this challenge equals this scenario or this outcome, which may not be a particularly beneficial challenge or outcome, beneficial outcome for you. It may not be one that structures you for success. So why not choose a more positive? Why not? Being that we have control over this, and being that we know we can utilize tools like this for our success, then why not stack it in our favor, right?
Yeah.
Mm,
That those story you told, it made me think about the training I went through with Dr. Tad James for timeline therapy is one of my trainings early in my professional career. Talked about, the whole timeline therapy is a tool for helping people literally kind of let go of negative emotions and past beliefs and things that they're holding on to. So it's a really powerful technique. But the key to it, or one of the key pieces to it, is that they have to learn from the event. And
mm,
if they aren't able to file away whatever it was they're supposed to learn, they can't seem to let go of the emotion or the belief or whatever it is that's been hindering them. So that idea that you just mentioned about what did you have to learn, is is such an important thing for people to begin to do, is whether it happened by your own volition, something that you made a mistake on, or whether it happened to you, doesn't really matter. You've got to, in order to be able to learn from it and let go of all the emotionality of it, you've got to begin to kind of think about those lessons. So,
mm.
so thank you for sharing that. That was kind of important. Um, so in this whole, experiences that you've had, the successes and the failures. Again, earlier on, we talked about how it has a ripple effect, right? So the people close to you, family members and all, when you are going through these hard times or stressors, it's it can be really trying for everybody. So what were some of the lessons that you took from those experiences that you would now try to teach people so that it doesn't destroy some of those relationships that, I think we all heard those stories, right, where those kinds of things can destroy not just the business but the relationships as well. Were there some key lessons that you learned in that you now try to help people?
Yeah, one of the things I'd like to focus on is dopamine and dopamine creation, and I actually wrote about that in the book with Tony Robbins, and it's all about utilizing the biochemistry of the body to our advantage and stimulating natural forms of dopamine that are healthy and non-addictive forms that can continue to help you get through those challenging times. So there's a lot of different things that I do into my day, including ice or cold water therapy, and listening to uplifting music and exercise and eating ketogenic ways to all these things actually have a really good impact on our body, on our biochemistry, on our mindset. There's a very, very strong link with keto and mood stability. So those are sort of things that I've adapted more and more. It didn't necessarily have them all going when I went through those challenging times, but I do understand that they're very, very useful to keep you in a positive mindset. And particularly with dopamine, I love to bring that into my business day, because I just feel it has so many beneficial outcomes for business and for entrepreneurship. Because when we're in the right mindset, we attract the right sort of people to us. It's just a natural process, and you're very much more creative, and you're very much more open to opportunities. So I find there's a very, very strong link with the biochemistry and the business relationships and business building, and even family. So if we're talking about family, all those things that help you deal with stress are going to be obviously very useful for balancing your relationships and ensuring that what happens at work doesn't necessarily come into the family life. And I have to say, I'm still working on mastering that. I'm not there by a long shot, and it's an ongoing process.
That absolutely. I one of the things I talk about when I use the acronym become a sower of possibility, right? So SOWER. And the E and R part of that is about going forward where so let me back up for a minute. So first you got to identify the seeds to your story, right? When you begin to become aware of all those labels and things like I mentioned earlier, then you take ownership, you weed out what you don't want, but that weeding part is a lifelong process, right? I mean, you may accidentally plant weeds in your life, or the storms of life will blow them in. But you like you're gonna have to weed your garden
Mm,
forever, right? It's an
mm,
ongoing thing, and
mm,
that's how we grow and cultivate things. And sometimes the students I've had have that initially seems kind of like overwhelming, like they just want to fix it once and go on, and it's like no, that's sorry, but that's not the way life
mhm,
works, you know. And that's where things like habits and rituals play a role in. And you just mentioned a couple, like you said, you do some exercise, and music was a big one. And the obviously with your nutritional background, that sounds like that's been an important
mm,
part. And
mm,
all those pieces are things like I talk about all the time, how important they are. And
mm,
I didn't really stop to think about that dopamine aspect of things, but the one of the things I used to talk about is fill your cup with good stuff because there's an old parable that kind of indicates whatever you fill your cup with when you get bumped into in life, that's what will spill out. So you want to spill out good stuff, not you know, not something that you
nice
didn't put
analogy.
in there.
Yeah.
Um,
Mm.
and that just made me think of that the whole dopamine piece. So is there a do you have some go-to kind of things in your life that you really besides the ice bath? You mentioned you mentioned that, which uh, I've tried. I just haven't been able to really kind of do that. That's a tough one for me. But uh, are
Yes.
there some other things like uh, that you do on a regular basis,
Mm.
morning, evening?
Mm, yeah, well, I mean, I don't do too much ice baths. But what I do is cold water. So
Okay.
I go down to the beach every morning. Regardless of if it's 0 degrees out there or if it's a nice sunny day, and it's just a fantastic way because mentally, if you can bring yourself to do something like that, the rest of the day is pretty easy. So when you're going out on the beach and it's raining and there's lightning, I mean, that's pretty crazy doing it with lightning around, but sometimes it happens. If it's hailing and you're jumping into the water and then you're freezing yourself on the sand as you come out, the sand is actually the coldest bit. It's crazy cold, but you feel, and there's no one else around. That gives you quite a dopamine hit. And dopamine's been shown to increase around 250% and lasts up to 4 hours. So it's a lot longer lasting than a drug that you would take to get to the same place. And it's natural and it's free. So that's why I like doing those sort of things. But even cold showers can be useful. And then the other side of it is ketosis. Ketosis is a very effective way of changing your biochemistry that stimulates more access to dopamine. So it allows where we get the dopamine hits from sugary foods and junk food. That's a very quick curve. Your blood sugar levels go up, insulin's released, and it's the sugar sucked out of the blood and stored away in the fat tissue. Ketosis is where we change the fuel of the body. We take away the big glucose sources and we start utilizing other fuel, and that's breaking down fat tissue and releasing ketones. And that has a very, very good impact on the mood. So that's one of the things that I've been in. In fact, one of my family members, who's a big foodie, unfortunately got diagnosed with cancer about 6 or 7 years ago. And one of the things that I'd been running keto weight loss programs in Perth, and I just set up some in Bali. But one of the main takeaways that I got from that was it is very good for cancer. And he had a combination of chemotherapy and ketosis, which I was focused on helping him with, and he was stage 4 terminal cancer, and thankfully he's doing well. He's doing very, very well now. And so it's very useful. But I went into ketosis to kind of set an example, because I knew he would be a tough nut to crack, because he loved his food and he loved certain foods which were no good for ketosis and for sugar, and cancer thrives on sugar. So yeah, so that's why I went into it, but also love the fact that it can be really useful for your business day, and anything that helps with business, and for me is something that I'll do and carry through with, and be persistent with. So I guess it's just really a question of finding your why. Why would you do it? Because it does require some discipline, but for me, if it's going to help with my business or mindset or give me a slight edge, it's another tool that I'll start adapting and utilizing. So that's why I do
You just mentioned the word discipline, and um, I think sometimes uh, that word, I don't know if I want to say misunderstand, people kind of misunderstand it, but um, it's such an important part. And to me, it's not, it, it really centers around being able to create rituals in your life. So that's kind of what I mentioned before. People talk about needing to have the discipline to create the rituals. And, you know, I struggle sometimes, I think, because of and maybe it was the lessons growing up. My dad always talked about self-discipline, 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 and trying to figure out what that means and how to develop it. And I just came to the conclusion that it's a shift where you realize that these habits provide that that thing you need and you want, and it's making that kind of connection
it.
to identity. And I think that was kind of big aha moment that I kind of had is and I use this as an example now because I run 4 days a week, and I don't really like it, but I love what it does for me, right?
Right.
So when I'm out in a run, I got to get up and I don't know, but once I go out and I get done, I like what it does for me. I've thought about maybe switching. Oh, maybe I'll start biking. Maybe I'll start doing something else. But I've ingrained the identity as a runner. And I know how to change that, but I'm kind of like, you know what? Like, I'm not going to change that. That's, and I can't not go too long without doing it
Mm.
because it's who I become.
Hmm.
And to me, that's the discipline part of it, right? Where those rituals become part of just who you are. So you can't go long without it because you can't go without being who you are. And
Beautiful.
it's that switch of trying to help people make it part of who they are. Would you say that some of these habits you have are part of who you are? Like it's
Yeah. It's
yeah.
it's hard not to do it once you've established those habits. It's all about dopamine. What you're doing there with the dopamine is exactly what we're addicted. We become addicted to it, and in a healthy, positive way. There is such thing as positive addictions, and endurance sports, particularly running, is known to be a very, very useful producer of dopamine. And there's that reward. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter in our brain that gives us feedback that we're doing the right stuff. It's a reward hormone. We feel good. So what you said, after you run is that I feel good. I don't like doing it, and you don't. But you know what's going to be at the end. You're going to feel good, and that's the dopamine. That's what makes you. And it's our body's giving us positive reward for doing something that actually benefits our health. So you're part of that really, really useful process, and that is essential for setting up your day in a successful way, and being in the right mindset, and it helps all that positivity. So once you've hooked into that, it's very hard to unhook. Once you've seen the real benefits of it, and you've created it as a habit, it becomes habit forming, because you're after that next little hit of feeling good and being rewarded for the good efforts that you've put into looking after your body. So yeah, it's a great system.
Yeah, absolutely. There,
Yeah.
just kind of looked at the clock. There is one more
Yes.
kind of question I wanted to ask as time's running down, and you had mentioned earlier about doing some financial literacy stuff with teenagers and all. Uh, when you go in and you do your whatever the work is, how much of it do you spend on the mindset aspect? Because there's the financial literacy and the actual technical aspect of money and all that. But as you and I have already talked about this show, is so much of how we handle money, think about money, treat money is tied into our beliefs and things that have been passed down to
Mm.
us. Mindset again, right? So
Yep.
so how much do you kind of balance that out? How do you address that with teenagers?
It's it's a bit that I love to sneak in there at any opportunity that I can, and it is very, very important. And I think you've touched on it, that we're all influenced by friends, family, society. There's all this already predetermined thought patterns that we have about money. A lot of people think it's bad. A lot of people think that it grows on tree, or that it doesn't grow on tree, because that's what we're taught. We're taught at a young age, and all these little things that we're taught can have a negative impact of when we're trying to move forwards in a business or in life in general. So the mindset is really good. I love talking about it. I love utilizing it and finding tools that are easy to implement for kids, and for any of us for that matter. So it's an essential part of helping move us forwards, particularly in that entrepreneurial space. We need to be resilient. We need to be able to change things to benefit us. There's always going to be hurdles in that area, and we need to be able to know systems, tools, and processes to be able to help keep us jumping over the hurdles and keep us moving forward. So the mindset is hugely important, and yeah, try and get that in wherever I can.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time out. If somebody wanted to find out more about you or get in touch with you or learn anything more, I know you have that one book with Tony and Brian Tracy. Are there other resources that you have? What would be the best way for people to find you or get in touch with you if they wanted?
Yeah, sure. Just through LinkedIn. Always happy to connect with anyone in the entrepreneurial space who's looking to grow businesses. We also, through nathanbaws.com, my website, we have opportunities where anyone who has a few challenges or hurdles with their business. I love chatting about this stuff, and we don't charge for it. So if there's any way we can help anyone, always open to those sort of assistance and collaborations.
Oh, fantastic. I'll make sure we put that stuff in the description for the show. So again, I appreciate you taking the time out. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Shark. Lovely to be here.
Another show where there's lots of words of wisdom. I talked quite a bit recently about mentoring and just these conversations that I have with my guests and all their various backgrounds, just being able to take out their experiences, their wisdom, and then you need to try to apply them in your own life. Sometimes that can be a struggle, which is why, uh, like Nathan mentioned, that he's had coaches, I've had coaches. Is why we still seek out those people, because sometimes you need that somebody just outside of yourself to help you, and that's really what's behind this um, mentorship program that my son Billy and I have rolling out, and it's not for everybody, but it is an opportunity to take advantage of all the experiences I've had, knowledge I've had, even some from my son. This is a family oriented uh, mentorship, and it's all about not just preparing the ground for building the mindset of a champion, but then going through the actual process of how to build those belief systems and the structures and character traits and all that that really enable you to not just survive the storms of life, but come out the other side much stronger. So I would encourage you to check out the championsmindsetmentorship.com, the championsmindsetmentorship.com, and take a look at that. And if you have any other questions or information, you can reach out to us and schedule a call. We'd love to kind of have that conversation with you. And until the next time, I encourage you to go out and live life to its fullest.